Grace stood at the front door, waving goodbye to her parents as their car pulled out of the driveway. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she realized she was now in charge of her younger siblings, Emma and Jack. At 15 years old, she was used to taking on responsibility, but being home alone with them for an entire weekend was a new level of independence. As the door closed behind her parents, Grace took a deep breath and turned to face her siblings, who were eagerly waiting in the living room. Emma, the bright-eyed 10-year-old, held on to her favorite stuffed animal, while Jack, a mischievous 7-year-old, fidgeted with his toy cars. They were both oblivious to the weight of their parents' absence. "All right, you two," Grace said, trying to sound confident. "Mom and Dad are counting on us to have a fun and safe weekend. Let's start by watching a movie together, just like we planned." Emma's face lit up, and Jack cheered, excited to spend quality time with their older sister. Grace led them to the cozy family room and helped them settle onto the couch. She had prepared a list of age-appropriate movies to choose from, knowing it would keep them entertained while she took care of other tasks. As the movie played, Grace busied herself in the kitchen, preparing popcorn and pouring drinks for her siblings. She wanted to make sure they felt comfortable and secure while their parents were away. Despite her attempts to focus on the task at hand, her mind couldn't help but wander, contemplating the responsibility she had taken on. Sitting back on the couch with her siblings, Grace watched as their eyes widened with excitement during the movie's thrilling moments. She couldn't help but smile, cherishing these simple, joyous moments of togetherness. Their bond as a family was strong, and Grace was determined to protect it. As the movie neared its end, Grace's phone buzzed with an incoming text. She glanced at it, seeing a message from her parents, checking in on them and expressing their love. It warmed her heart, knowing they were thinking of their children even in their absence. Just as Grace was about to reply, the phone suddenly went dead. Confused, she tried turning it back on, but it remained lifeless. She felt a twinge of unease creep up her spine. It was strange for her phone to malfunction like that, especially when her parents had just contacted her. Anxious thoughts raced through her mind. She walked over to the landline phone in the hallway, intending to call her parents or at least check the connection. But to her dismay, the landline was completely silent. No dial tone, nothing. A wave of panic washed over Grace. It felt as if a heavy shroud of isolation had descended upon the house. She looked at her siblings, oblivious to the sudden disruption, and realized she had to keep a calm facade. "Hey guys," she said, forcing a smile. "How about we have a little adventure and play a game together after the movie? We'll make this weekend unforgettable." Emma and Jack exchanged excited glances, immediately forgetting about the movie's ending. Grace's plan seemed to distract them, but deep down she couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Her mind raced with questions. Why were the phones suddenly dead? Was it just a coincidence or something more sinister? With determination and a protective instinct, Grace decided that she would keep her siblings safe, no matter what. She had to find a way to overcome this challenge and ensure their weekend didn't turn into a nightmare. With a sense of determination, Grace led Emma and Jack away from the television, their small hands clasped in hers. As they ventured into the playroom, she hoped to distract them from the eerie silence of the disconnected phones. Inside the playroom, colorful toys and books lined the shelves, creating a cozy and familiar atmosphere. Grace knew that engaging her younger siblings in activities would help keep their minds off the strange situation and provide a sense of normalcy. "All right, you two," Grace said, crouching down to their level. "Let's dive into an exciting world of imagination. How about we build a magnificent castle using these building blocks?" Emma and Jack's eyes sparkled with delight as they eagerly joined in. They stacked blocks upon blocks, constructing a grand fortress that stretched across the playroom floor. Grace couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. It was moments like these that reminded her of the power of family bonds and their ability to bring comfort in times of uncertainty. As the castle took shape, Grace's thoughts intermittently wandered back to the issue with the phones. She pondered whether it was just a technical glitch, or if something more sinister was afoot. Perhaps it was best to approach a neighbor for help, she considered, hoping to find an answer or an explanation for the sudden communication blackout. The sound of laughter and the clatter of falling blocks brought her back to the present. Grace admired her siblings' creation, but a tingling unease still lingered within her. She couldn't ignore the need to ensure their safety. "All right, brave knights and princesses," Grace proclaimed, adopting a playful tone. "Our castle is complete, but there's one more task. We must embark on a noble quest to the neighboring kingdom." Emma and Jack's eyes widened with excitement. Grace knew that the neighbor's house wasn't technically a kingdom, but it would provide a sense of adventure for her siblings, giving her a chance to seek help discreetly. The trio ventured out of the house, the warmth of the setting sun casting a golden hue over their small town. Grace held their hands tightly as they approached the Jenkins residence, their friendly neighbors just a few houses down. Grace knocked on the door, her heart pounding with anticipation. Mrs. Jenkins, a kind-hearted elderly woman, answered with a smile. Her wrinkled face mirrored the warmth in her voice as she welcomed them inside. "What brings you all here?" Mrs. Jenkins asked, peering down at the children. Grace hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain their situation without alarming the elderly woman. Finally, she decided to be honest, trusting in Mrs. Jenkins' wisdom and understanding. "Our phone suddenly stopped working, and we can't reach anyone," Grace explained, her voice filled with concern. "I thought maybe you could help us figure out what's happening." Mrs. Jenkins' expression turned sympathetic, sensing Grace's unease. She ushered them into her cozy living room and offered them homemade cookies and milk. Grace felt a sense of relief, finding solace in the presence of a caring neighbor. As the children indulged in cookies, Grace poured out her worries to Mrs. Jenkins, recounting the bizarre events that had unfolded since their parents' departure. Mrs. Jenkins listened intently, her kind eyes reflecting understanding and concern. "My dear," Mrs. Jenkins said softly, placing a comforting hand on Grace's shoulder. "I've noticed some strange occurrences in this town lately. Let me make a few calls and see if I can find any information for you." Hope surged within Grace as she watched Mrs. Jenkins take action. The weight of the situation felt a little lighter with the support of their neighbor. Grace paced back and forth in the living room, her anxiety mounting with each passing minute. Mrs. Jenkins had gone to make phone calls, hoping to uncover information about the sudden communication blackout in the town. Meanwhile, Grace couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that lingered in the air. As she waited for Mrs. Jenkins's return, the silence of the house was broken by the shrill ring of the telephone. Grace's heart skipped a beat, and a mix of anticipation and dread coursed through her veins. She rushed to answer it, hoping for a reassuring voice on the other end. "Hello," Grace spoke tentatively, her voice trembling slightly. A chilling silence greeted her. Then, a low, distorted voice came through the receiver, sending shivers down her spine. "You can't escape, little girl," the voice whispered, filled with an unsettling mix of menace and delight. Fear washed over Grace as she clutched the phone tightly. Her mind raced with questions. Who was on the other end? What did they want? The voice sounded familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. Summoning her courage, Grace managed to respond, her voice quivering. "Who is this? What do you want from us?" The voice laughed sinisterly. "Oh, little girl, you'll find out soon enough. This house, it holds secrets, secrets that will tear your family apart." Grace's grip on the phone tightened. Her thoughts raced back to the town's troubled history, the unsolved murders, and the chilling realization that their current situation might be connected. Suddenly, the line went dead, leaving Grace in a state of heightened unease. She hung up the phone and stood there, trembling with a mix of fear and determination. She couldn't let her siblings see her vulnerability. She had to protect them, find a way to outwit whoever was behind the phone calls. Just then, the front door creaked open and Mrs. Jenkins stepped inside, carrying a stack of papers. Grace rushed to her eyes filled with a mix of hope and desperation. "Mrs. Jenkins, we received a disturbing phone call." It was a chilling voice, filled with threats and references to the secrets of this house. Grace blurted out, her voice quivering. Mrs. Jenkins furrowed her brow, concern etching her face. "Oh, dear, I've been making some calls, and it seems there's a dark history attached to this house. Legends say that a deranged killer once resided here, driven by a twisted obsession with the concept of family." Grace's heart pounded in her chest as the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. It all made sense now. The strange occurrences, the phone outage, the phone call. The house itself seemed to hold a malevolent presence, its secrets coming to light in the most sinister ways. "We need to protect the children," Grace said firmly, her voice filled with determination. "We can't stay here." Mrs. Jenkins nodded in agreement. "You're right, dear. Let's gather your siblings and find a safe place. I have a friend who lives on the outskirts of town. He has a cabin secluded in the woods. It might offer us the refuge we need." Together, Grace and Mrs. Jenkins hurriedly gathered Emma and Jack, explaining that they were going on an adventure to a friend's cabin. The children, sensing the urgency in their voices, followed without question. As they left the house, a sense of foreboding hung in the air. Grace couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the house itself held an evil presence that sought to tear them apart. The journey to the secluded cabin nestled deep within the woods was filled with an air of unease. Grace kept a watchful eye on her younger siblings, clutching their hands tightly as they followed Mrs. Jenkins along the winding path. The dense foliage and hushed whispers of the trees heightened her senses, making her acutely aware of the danger lurking in the shadows. As they approached the cabin, a sense of relief washed over Grace. The rustic structure stood as a sanctuary, a temporary respite from the malevolent presence that seemed to haunt their previous home. Mrs. Jenkins unlocked the door and they stepped into the cabin's cozy interior, seeking solace within its sturdy walls. Inside, the cabin exuded warmth, with a crackling fireplace casting dancing shadows across the wooden floors. Grace led her siblings to the living area, instructing them to settle on the comfortable couch while she and Mrs. Jenkins ensured the cabin was secure. As Grace checked the windows and locked the doors, a faint whisper drifted through the stillness of the cabin. She froze, her senses on high alert. It was as if the very walls held secrets, secrets eager to reveal themselves. Unable to ignore her instincts, Grace decided to explore further. She ventured into a small study, lined with shelves of dusty books and weathered photographs. Among them, a particularly old picture caught her attention. An image of a family, their faces eerily familiar. A chill ran down Grace's spine as she realized the family in the photograph bore a striking resemblance to her own. It was as if the history of the house was intertwined with their own family's past, haunting them in the present. Before she could delve deeper into her discovery, a sudden noise startled Grace. It was a faint scratching sound originating from the attic above. Panic gripped her heart as she realized she wasn't alone in the cabin. Swiftly, Grace raced back to her siblings and Mrs. Jenkins, her face pale with urgency. "We're not alone. Someone or something is here with us." Fear reflected in Mrs. Jenkins' eyes, but she remained resolute. "We need to protect the children. We have to find a way to ward off this malevolent force." Together, they formulated a plan. Mrs. Jenkins retrieved a box from a hidden compartment containing an array of peculiar items. A vial of salt, a bundle of sage, and a set of old, weathered charms. These objects were said to possess protective powers against supernatural entities. With trembling hands, Grace and Mrs. Jenkins began their preparations. They sprinkled salt at the doorways and windows, forming a protective barrier against whatever evil lurked. The fragrant smoke of the burning sage filled the air, cleansing the cabin of negative energies. As they worked, the scratching sound grew louder, reverberating through the walls. The children huddled close, their wide eyes filled with a mix of fear and trust in their older sister and Mrs. Jenkins. With the charms in hand, Grace and Mrs. Jenkins led the children in a chant, invoking ancient words of protection and strength. The room filled with an electric energy, an unseen force pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, the scratching ceased. Silence descended upon the cabin, broken only by the steady rhythm of their breaths. Grace and Mrs. Jenkins exchanged glances, their resolve unwavering. They had managed to hold the malevolent force at bay, if only for now. As the night wore on, Grace kept a vigilant watch, her senses heightened. She knew they couldn't let their guard down. The cabin, while providing temporary shelter, held its own secrets, and the battle against the darkness was far from over. The first rays of dawn painted the horizon with hues of gold as Grace sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the vast expanse of the woods. Sleep had eluded her, her mind consumed by the mysteries surrounding the cabin and their family's connection to it. Mrs. Jenkins emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of warm breakfast. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, offering a sense of comfort in the face of uncertainty. Grace turned her attention to her siblings, who were still fast asleep, their innocent faces untouched by the events that had unfolded. "Grace, my dear," Mrs. Jenkins began gently, placing the tray on the table. "There's something I need to share with you. It's about your family's connection to this house." Grace's gaze locked with Mrs. Jenkins. Her curiosity piqued. She leaned in, eager to uncover the truth that lay hidden within the walls of the cabin. "This house has a long history," Mrs. Jenkins continued, her voice tinged with a mixture of sadness and determination. "Decades ago, a family lived here. The same family you saw in the photograph. They were known for their deep love for one another, their bond unbreakable. But tragedy struck and their lives were torn apart." Grace's heart pounded in her chest as Mrs. Jenkins recounted the tale. The family had fallen victim to a senseless act of violence, their existence forever entwined with the cabin. Their spirits were said to linger, seeking peace and resolution. The spirits of that family have remained restless, longing for closure. Mrs. Jenkins explained, "It seems that their presence has affected your own family, drawing you into their story." Grace felt a shiver run down her spine, the weight of the revelation settling upon her. It all made sense now. The strange occurrences, the malevolent force that seemed to haunt them. It was the lingering anguish of the past, reaching out across generations. "We must find a way to bring peace to these spirits," Grace said, her voice filled with determination. "We owe it to them and to our own family." Mrs. Jenkins nodded, her gaze filled with admiration for Grace's courage. "There's an ancient ritual that can help bring resolution. It requires gathering personal belongings of the family, as well as their photographs, and performing a ceremony to honor their memory." Grace listened intently, absorbing every detail. She knew that this was the path they must follow, the path toward understanding, forgiveness, and closure. As the day unfolded, Grace and Mrs. Jenkins set out on a mission. They combed through the cabin, collecting cherished objects and photographs that had belonged to the family of the past. Each item held a story, a piece of their shared history waiting to be revealed. With the gathered items in hand, they prepared for the ritual. The family photographs were arranged in a circle, surrounded by candles. Grace, Mrs. Jenkins, and the children joined hands, forming a bond between past and present. Together, they spoke words of remembrance, of love, and forgiveness. They acknowledged the pain that had plagued the spirits and expressed their desire to bring peace to their tormented souls. As the final words echoed through the cabin, a gentle breeze rustled the curtains, carrying with it a sense of release and relief. Grace felt a weight lift from her shoulders, as if a burden centuries old had finally been set to rest. With tears of gratitude and resolution in her eyes, Grace knew that their actions had made a difference. The spirits of the past were finally granted the peace they longed for, and her own family could now move forward, free from the grip of the haunting presence. With the guidance and support of Mrs. Jenkins, Grace and her siblings began to heal from the ordeal they had endured. They spent their days exploring the beauty of nature, taking solace in the tranquility of the woods that surrounded the cabin. Mrs. Jenkins became a constant presence in their lives, offering guidance and wisdom as they navigated the journey of recovery. She shared stories of resilience and triumph, reminding them of the strength that lay within their hearts. Emily found herself alone in the house due to a combination of circumstances. Her family had planned a trip, but Emily decided to stay behind to explore the old Victorian house that held a mysterious allure for her. She saw this as an opportunity to have some uninterrupted time to uncover the secrets hidden within its walls. With her family's consent and assurance of regular check-ins, Emily embarked on this solitary adventure, unaware of the haunting encounters that awaited her. Emily stood in the dimly lit hallway, her heart pounding against her chest. The house seemed to hold its breath as if it was alive, watching her every move. Her family had left for their trip just hours ago, leaving her alone in the old Victorian house. It was a place filled with history, but also with a sense of lingering dread. As Emily moved cautiously through the empty rooms, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows danced along the walls, and the creaking floorboards echoed through the silence. She tried to convince herself that it was just her imagination playing tricks. But deep down, she knew there was something more. In the hallway, an antique grandfather clock stood tall and imposing. Its hands moved with an eerie precision, as if counting down to an unknown event. Emily's eyes lingered on the clock, drawn to its ornate details and the air of mystery surrounding it. She had always been fascinated by the stories her grandmother told about the clock, tales of secret compartments and hidden treasures. Curiosity gnawed at Emily's mind. She approached the clock and examined it closely, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings. Suddenly, a soft click echoed through the hallway, and Emily felt a rush of excitement. A hidden passage behind the clock had been revealed. With trembling hands, Emily reached out and pushed against the solid wood. The clock swung open, revealing a narrow passageway, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The flickering candle in her hand cast dancing shadows on the aged walls, as if warning her of the unknown dangers that lay ahead. Taking a deep breath, Emily stepped into the passage, the weight of anticipation heavy on her shoulders. The air grew colder as she ventured further, the flickering candle casting eerie shapes along the stone walls. Whispers, barely audible, whispered through the darkness, sending a shiver down her spine. Her mind raced with thoughts of turning back, of retreating to the safety of the familiar rooms. But something compelled her forward, an unyielding curiosity that refused to be quelled. The passage seemed to stretch on endlessly. With each step deeper into the abyss, Emily's connection to the outside world dwindled. Time lost its meaning as she continued, her footsteps the only sound accompanying the whispers that grew louder and more urgent. The walls seemed to close in around her, the passageway becoming claustrophobic, suffocating. Yet she pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within the house. Finally, the passage opened up into a small chamber. The candle's glow illuminated the space, revealing an array of forgotten artifacts scattered across a dusty table. Among them, a worn-out journal caught Emily's attention. She gingerly picked it up, its fragile pages filled with faded ink. As she turned the pages, her eyes widened with each revelation. The journal chronicled the tragic tale of Lily, a young girl who had once lived in the house. It spoke of her untimely demise, her spirit trapped within these very walls. Emily's heart ached for the girl, and she couldn't help but feel a connection, as if their fates were intertwined. Closing the journal, Emily made a silent promise to herself and to Lily. She would uncover the truth, find a way to set her spirit free. The house had become more than just walls and floors. It had become a vessel for secrets and lost souls. With renewed determination, Emily extinguished the candle, plunging the chamber into darkness. She retraced her steps, the whispers fading into the distance. As she emerged from the hidden passage, she glanced back at the grandfather clock. Knowing that the path to unraveling, Emily stood before the closed door of the hidden passage, the memory of the whispers still echoing in her mind. The journal she had discovered shed light on the tragic fate of Lily, a young girl trapped within the house, determined to help her restless spirit find peace. Emily knew she needed to further explore the hidden passage. With the flickering candle in hand, Emily pushed open the door, its hinges groaning in protest. The narrow passage awaited her, its walls draped in shadows. She took a deep breath, mustering her courage, and stepped into the dimly lit corridor. As Emily ventured deeper into the passageway, the air grew colder, sending a chill down her spine. The whispers returned, their haunting voices growing louder. She strained to decipher their words, feeling a sense of urgency and desperation within them. The flickering candle cast eerie shadows on the walls, playing tricks on her mind. Emily's heart raced, her senses on high alert. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes followed her every move. Step by step, Emily navigated the labyrinthine path, her hand brushing against the cold, rough stones. Her imagination conjured up images of the spirits trapped within these walls, their presence becoming more palpable with each passing moment. Suddenly, a faint glow caught her attention. She followed it, leading her to a hidden alcove. Inside, a small, ornate mirror hung on the wall, its surface reflecting a distorted version of reality. Emily approached it cautiously, captivated by its peculiar charm. As she gazed into the mirror, the whispers intensified, their voices intertwining with her own reflection. She watched as the room behind her transformed into a shadowy realm, a gateway to the spirit world. Fear and fascination battled within her, but her determination to help Lily prevailed. With a trembling hand, Emily reached out and touched the mirror's surface. A surge of energy coursed through her, sending ripples across the glass. The mirror became a portal, a passage into a realm beyond the physical. Summoning her courage, Emily stepped through the mirror, crossing the threshold into a spectral dimension. The air was thick with an otherworldly aura, and ethereal figures moved in the periphery of her vision. She felt both connected and detached from this realm, a witness to the suffering of trapped souls. Guided by an unseen force, Emily floated through the spectral plane, drawn toward a source of anguish and despair. The whispers guided her, their urgency guiding her steps. Finally, she arrived in a desolate chamber, the air heavy with sorrow. There, in the center of the room, stood a small music box, its delicate tune resonating through the spectral realm. Emily's heart swelled with empathy as she realized its significance. This music box held the key to unlocking Lily's torment. As she reached out to grasp the music box, a surge of emotions flooded through her. Memories of Lily's past, her dreams and aspirations, intertwined with Emily's own experiences. It was a moment of profound connection, a shared bond between the living and the dead. With the music box in hand, Emily knew she had the power to bring peace to Lily's spirit. She retraced her steps, leaving the spectral realm behind, and emerged back into the hidden passage. The whispers faded, replaced by a sense of anticipation. With determination burning in her eyes, Emily carried the music box out of the passage and into the familiar surroundings of the house. The journey had only just begun, and the next step would be to uncover the truth behind Lily's tragic fate. As Emily stared at the closed door of the hidden passage, a mixture of trepidation and hope filled her heart. Emily clutched the music box tightly in her hands, its weight both comforting and ominous. The whispers had subsided, but the presence of the spirits lingered in the air. She knew that the journey ahead would be treacherous, but she was determined to help set Lily's spirit free. As Emily made her way through the house, the atmosphere seemed charged with an otherworldly energy. Cold drafts brushed against her skin, causing her breath to hitch. She couldn't ignore the feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes followed her every move. In the living room, she placed the music box on an old, worn-out table. The room was adorned with antique furniture, each piece carrying its own story. Among them, an old photograph caught Emily's attention. It depicted a family, their smiles frozen in time. She couldn't help but notice a striking resemblance between Lily and one of the girls in the photograph. Her intuition urged her to investigate further. Emily carefully lifted the photograph, revealing a hidden compartment beneath it. Inside, she found a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The letters bore the initials LM, Lily's initials. Excitement surged through her as she realized she had stumbled upon a cache of Lily's personal correspondence. With trembling hands, Emily began to read the letters. Each one painted a vivid picture of Lily's life, her hopes, dreams, and the darkness that plagued her. She learned about Lily's love for music, her yearning to be heard and understood. But she also discovered the despair that drove her to the brink of despair. One particular letter caught Emily's attention. It spoke of a forbidden ritual, a desperate attempt to communicate with the spirits that haunted the house. It was the key to unlocking the secrets that held Lily's spirit captive. Determined to find answers, Emily turned to Mr. Turner, the local historian who possessed knowledge about the house's dark past. She paid him a visit, clutching the bundle of letters tightly. Mr. Turner welcomed her into his cluttered study, his eyes lighting up with curiosity. As Emily shared her findings, he leaned in, his gaze focused and intent. He revealed that the house had long been rumored to have connections to the spirit world, and that Lily's tragic fate was intertwined with a malevolent force. He warned Emily of the dangers that awaited her on her quest, cautioning her to tread carefully. But he also saw the strength and determination in her eyes and offered his guidance, sharing his knowledge of the forbidden ritual. According to Mr. Turner, the ritual required a delicate balance of elements, an ancient incantation, a relic connected to Lily's past, and a willingness to confront the malevolent force head. It was a risky endeavor, one that could either release Lily's spirit or unleash further chaos. Emily knew the risks, but she couldn't turn back now. Armed with newfound knowledge, she returned to the house, ready to face the darkness that lurked within. As the moonlight filtered through the windows, Emily gathered the necessary elements for the ritual. She recited the incantation, her voice steady and filled with determination. With the music box as the focal point, she opened herself up to the spiritual realm, calling out to Lily's trapped spirit. The room filled with an otherworldly energy, as if time itself stood still. Shadows danced on the walls, their movements synchronized with Emily's words. The malevolent force that had tormented the house grew restless, pushing against the boundaries of the ritual. Emily's heart raced as she stared into the music box, her eyes locked with Lily's spirit. She pleaded with her, offering solace and understanding. A hush fell over the room as Emily continued to gaze into the music box, her eyes locked with Lily's spirit. The air crackled with tension, and the malevolent force that had plagued the house grew stronger, threatening to shatter the fragile connection Emily had established. With a surge of determination, Emily reached out, her hand trembling as it touched the music box. A spark of energy passed between them, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. The malevolent force unleashed its fury, swirling around her like a tempest. But Emily stood her ground, fueled by her unwavering resolve to help Lily. Using every ounce of strength within her, Emily spoke words of encouragement, promising to release Lily from the torment that held her captive. She channeled her empathy, her love, and her unwavering belief that light could conquer darkness. Slowly, the malevolent force began to wane, its power diminishing under the weight of Emily's compassion. The room grew still, and a serene calm settled over the space. The music box glowed softly, emanating a soothing melody that resonated within Emily's heart. Lily's spirit hovered before her, her ethereal form glowing with a newfound radiance. Her eyes, once filled with anguish, now sparkled with gratitude. A sense of peace washed over Emily as she realized that she had succeeded in her mission. Lily's spirit was finally free. With a gentle smile, Lily mouthed her gratitude to Emily, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had formed. And then, like a wisp of smoke, she dissipated into the air, leaving behind a profound sense of closure. Emily took a deep breath, the weight of the world lifting from her shoulders. The house felt different now, as if the malevolent force had been expelled, leaving behind a sanctuary of serenity. The shadows that once danced on the walls now appeared softer, their movements benign. In the days that followed, Emily dedicated herself to uncovering the house's hidden history, determined to prevent similar tragedies from befalling future occupants. She delved into Mr. Turner's archives, piecing together fragments of forgotten tales that had long been buried. Her research led her to a startling revelation, a cursed artifact buried beneath the foundation of the house. It was the source of the malevolent force that had tormented both Lily and countless others before her. Emily knew that she had to destroy the artifact to ensure the house's future inhabitants would be safe. Armed with newfound knowledge, Emily ventured into the depths of the house's cellar, following a faint trail that led her to a hidden chamber. Within its confines, she discovered the cursed artifact, a dark, twisted object that seemed to pulse with malevolence. With steady hands, Emily gathered the necessary tools to dismantle the artifact. She called upon her courage, knowing that she had to sever the connection between the object and the house. As she struck the final blow, a powerful surge of energy reverberated through the cellar, shaking the very foundation of the house. The walls groaned, as if in relief, and a tranquil stillness settled over the entire structure. Emily emerged from the cellar, a mixture of exhaustion and triumph etched upon her face. She knew that she had succeeded in banishing the malevolent force once and for all. As the days turned into weeks, the house transformed into a place of warmth and tranquility. Emily felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had not only saved Lily's spirit, but also freed the house from its haunting past. Word of Emily's courageous endeavors spread throughout the community, and the house became a symbol of resilience and triumph over darkness. It stood as a testament. The town was enveloped in an eerie silence as Alice gazed out of her bedroom window. The once lively streets now lay empty, devoid of any signs of life. It was as if the town had fallen under a dark spell, trapped in a perpetual state of hushed desolation. Alice, a 22-year-old with wavy chestnut hair and piercing green eyes, found herself home alone on this dreary evening. Her parents had gone on an urgent business trip, leaving her in the care of their cozy suburban house. It was supposed to be an ordinary night, but the recent outbreak had turned everything upside down. The disease had descended upon the town like a relentless storm. People fell sick, their bodies weakened by a mysterious ailment. The symptoms ranged from high fever and debilitating fatigue to coughing fits that seemed to rattle their very core. Panic had swept through the community, prompting the authorities to impose a strict quarantine. Alice's parents had heeded the warnings, reluctantly leaving her in the perceived safety of their home. But as the days went by, the situation worsened. News reports painted a grim picture of the disease's progression, with talk of a mounting death toll and a sense of impending doom. Standing alone in her room, Alice felt the weight of the silence pressing down upon her. She longed for the familiar sounds of her parents' laughter, the warmth of their embrace. But now, all that surrounded her were empty rooms and lingering shadows, haunting reminders of a life that once was. Determined not to succumb to despair, Alice mustered her courage and embarked on a mission to gather information. She grabbed her smartphone and began scrolling through social media feeds and news websites, hoping to find answers amidst the chaos. The reports were grim, filled with tales of despair, but also glimmers of resilience and hope. As the night wore on, Alice's anxiety grew. The house seemed to whisper secrets, its creaking floorboards a chorus of unease. She decided to venture downstairs, her footsteps echoing through the hallway. Each room she passed felt like a void, a reminder of her parents' absence. In the kitchen, Alice opened the refrigerator, finding it stocked with essentials her parents had left behind. As she poured herself a glass of orange juice, she noticed a note left by her mother on the countertop. It was a message of love and reassurance, urging Alice to stay strong and to believe that they would be reunited soon. Tears welled up in Alice's eyes as she clutched the note close to her heart. She refused to let despair consume her. She would honor her parents' trust in her and find a way to weather the storm that had befallen their town. With renewed determination, Alice made a plan. She would reach out to her friends and neighbors, gathering information about the disease and sharing resources. She would become a beacon of hope in the darkness, forging connections in a world that felt isolated and fragmented. As the clock ticked past midnight, Alice set up a small workstation in the living room. Armed with a notebook, a pen, and her smartphone, she began reaching out to others, seeking solace in the knowledge that she was not alone in this struggle. The night stretched on, but Alice refused to surrender to exhaustion. She knew that the road ahead would be treacherous, but she was determined to navigate it with resilience and courage. The town's once vibrant streets now lay shrouded in an unsettling stillness. Alice woke up to the morning light filtering through her bedroom window, her heart heavy with the knowledge that her parents were still absent. Anxiety gnawed at her as she contemplated the state of the world outside. Determined to gather more information, Alice hurried downstairs, her steps echoing through the quiet house. She switched on the television, hoping to find some updates on the outbreak that had plunged the town into chaos. The news anchor's somber voice filled the room, reporting the latest developments. The disease, which had initially seemed like an isolated incident, had spread like wildfire. Hospitals were overwhelmed, and resources were stretched thin. The town had become a battleground of fear and uncertainty, with each passing day bringing news of rising infection rates and tragic fatalities. Images of makeshift hospitals and medical personnel in hazmat suits flashed across the screen. Reports spoke of quarantine zones, where the infected were isolated from the rest of the town in an attempt to contain the spread. Alice's heart sank as she realized the gravity of the situation. As the day wore on, Alice felt a sense of unease settle in her bones. The occasional sound of distant sirens pierced the silence, a haunting reminder of the growing chaos beyond her walls. She couldn't help but wonder if her parents were safe, their fates intertwined with those of the other patients. Determined not to be consumed by helplessness, Alice decided to take matters into her own hands. She grabbed a notepad and a pen, jotting down every relevant piece of information she could gather from the news reports. She studied maps, tracing the areas most affected by the outbreak, hoping to gain insight into the disease's patterns. With a plan forming in her mind, Alice reached for her phone and dialed her parents' number. As it went straight to voicemail, her worry deepened. She left a heartfelt message, pleading with them to stay strong and promising that she would do everything in her power to find them and bring them back home. Feeling a mix of determination and trepidation, Alice ventured outside for the first time since her parents' departure. The once familiar streets now wore a haunting emptiness. Shop windows stood shuttered, their colorful displays hidden from view. A sense of eerie stillness hung in the air, broken only by the occasional gust of wind. Alice navigated the desolate streets cautiously, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of movement. She made her way to the local hospital, a towering building that now served as the epicenter of the town's battle against the disease. She hoped to find answers, or at least a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. Approaching the entrance, Alice's heart pounded in her chest. Fear and uncertainty gripped her, but her determination pushed her forward. The hospital's doors stood ajar, revealing a somber scene within. Medical personnel rushed past her, their faces etched with exhaustion and despair. Alice approached a nurse, her voice shaky but resolute. She inquired about her parents, hoping against hope for some reassuring news. The nurse's eyes filled with sympathy as she gently explained that the situation was dire and that many patients were fighting for their lives. Tears welled up in Alice's eyes, but she refused to let despair take hold. She thanked the nurse and made her way back home, her mind swirling with a mix of emotions. The reality of the outbreak had sunk in, and Alice knew that the path ahead would be arduous. As she re-entered her empty house, a renewed sense of purpose fueled her determination. She would become her parents' beacon of hope. Alice sat in her room, surrounded by a map of the town and a stack of notebooks filled with information about the outbreak. Determination burned within her as she plotted her next move. It was clear that relying solely on external updates wouldn't be enough. She needed to take action. With a sense of purpose, Alice set out to make her home a fortress. She scoured the house for tools and materials, determined to fortify it against potential dangers. She piled heavy furniture against the doors, creating makeshift barricades that would deter intruders. Windows were reinforced with plywood, providing an additional layer of protection. In the garage, Alice discovered her father's toolbox. She rummaged through it, gathering a variety of tools that could be useful in her quest for survival. A wrench, a hammer, and a sturdy utility knife were added to her arsenal. She also found a spool of thick rope, envisioning its potential for climbing or creating traps if necessary. As she explored the house, Alice stumbled upon her father's collection of camping gear tucked away in the attic. Her eyes widened with a mix of relief and excitement. Among the supplies were a portable stove, a set of durable hiking boots, and a compact first aid kit. She carefully packed these essentials into a sturdy backpack, preparing for any eventuality. Satisfied with her efforts, Alice stood in the living room, surveying her handiwork. She felt a glimmer of pride, knowing that she had transformed her home into a fortress against the unknown. But deep down, she knew that safety within these walls was temporary. She needed a plan, a strategy for finding a cure and reuniting with her parents. Alice returned to her makeshift command center, firing up her laptop. She dove into the depths of the internet, scouring medical forums and news articles for any potential leads. The words antiviral research caught her eye, and she clicked on a link that promised a possible breakthrough. The article detailed a team of scientists working on an experimental antiviral drug in a nearby research facility. Their aim was to develop a cure for the outbreak that had plagued the town. Alice's heart raced with a surge of hope. If she could access that facility, there might be a chance to find the cure and save her parents. But the research facility was heavily guarded, and the streets were teeming with infected individuals. Alice knew that she couldn't embark on this perilous journey alone. She needed a partner, someone she could trust. A name flashed in her mind. Ethan, a classmate known for his resourcefulness and quick thinking. Alice had seen him once in a while during their school's virtual sessions. She recalled their occasional conversations where they exchanged tips on surviving in the midst of the outbreak. Determined to seek his help, Alice typed a message to Ethan, explaining her situation and proposing an alliance. She highlighted the urgency of the mission, emphasizing the need to find a cure and reunite with their loved ones. With a racing heart, she hit the send button and prayed for a swift response. Hours passed, And just as Alice was starting to lose hope, a notification chimed on her phone. It was a message from Ethan, filled with determination and a shared sense of purpose. He agreed to meet her at a designated location, ready to join forces in their quest for survival. A surge of relief washed over Alice as she read Ethan's message. She knew that together, they stood a better chance of finding the cure and bringing an end to the nightmare that had consumed their town. With newfound hope, she packed her backpack, bracing herself for the journey ahead. Alice's heart raced with anticipation as she stepped out of her fortified home, her backpack slung over her shoulder. The world outside seemed even more desolate than before, with empty streets stretching out before her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the journey ahead. Walking briskly, Alice made her way to the designated meeting spot. It was a small park nestled amidst towering trees, their branches swaying in the breeze. She scanned the area, searching for any signs of Ethan. Moments later, she spotted him standing near a bench, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a mix of caution and determination. As she approached, Ethan's face broke into a smile of recognition. He extended a hand in greeting, and Alice shook it firmly. There was a sense of camaraderie in that handshake, a silent agreement that they were in this together. Ethan, a lanky teenager with sandy hair and a mischievous grin, was well prepared for the journey. He wore a backpack similar to Alice's, filled with supplies and tools. His eyes gleamed with a combination of curiosity and resolve. "We're going to find a way to save them," Ethan said, his voice filled with determination. "We won't let this disease tear our families apart." Alice nodded, her gaze steady. "I believe that too. We have to stay focused and stay strong." Together, they charted a course towards the research facility, weaving through empty streets and abandoned buildings. The silence was broken only by the distant sound of sirens and the occasional flutter of a bird taking flight. As they approached the outskirts of town, they encountered their first obstacle, a barricade manned by armed guards. It was clear that the authorities were taking extreme measures to contain the outbreak. Alice and Ethan exchanged glances, their determination unyielding. "We can't go through," Alice whispered. "But perhaps we can find a way around." They backtracked, seeking an alternative route. Alice remembered an old dirt path that ran parallel to the main road. It was less traveled, hidden among overgrown shrubs and tangled branches. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to bypass the barricade. They ventured onto the dirt path, their footsteps cautious and deliberate. The atmosphere grew dense with an eerie quiet, broken only by the rustling of leaves under their feet. Each step brought them closer to their goal, but also deeper into the unknown. As they trekked through the wilderness, Alice and Ethan shared stories of their lives before the outbreak. They spoke of their families, their dreams, and the moments that had shaped them. In those conversations, they found solace, a reminder of the humanity that still thrived amidst the chaos. Hours turned into days as they navigated through the wilderness, enduring fatigue and hunger. They sustained themselves with the meager rations they had packed, each bite a reminder of the urgency that drove them forward. Finally, on the third day, they reached the outskirts of the research facility. It stood tall and imposing, its walls fortified and its entrance guarded. Alice and Ethan surveyed the area, seeking an entry point that would allow them to infiltrate the facility unnoticed. Their eyes locked on a ventilation shaft located high above the ground. It seemed like a risky proposition, but they knew it was their best chance. With the help of a nearby tree and their combined strength, they managed to hoist Alice up, allowing her to crawl through the narrow shaft. Inside the facility, Alice explored cautiously, staying close to the shadows. She stumbled upon a laboratory, its pristine countertops lined with rows of test tubes and beakers. It was clear that important research was being conducted here. Alice's hands trembled with anticipation as she flipped through the pages of the folder she had discovered. It contained detailed research notes, diagrams, and experimental data, all centered around a potential breakthrough in the fight against the outbreak. The excitement and hope surged through her veins. She snapped pictures of the most crucial information using her phone, capturing every detail, determined to share it with Ethan and devise a plan. As she continued her exploration of the facility, she stumbled upon a locked door marked with a caution sign. A surge of curiosity overcame her, compelling her to investigate further. Alice reached into her backpack and retrieved the tools she had brought, carefully selecting a lockpick. With a steady hand, she maneuvered the tools and managed to unlock the door. What lay behind it sent a shiver down her spine. The room was dimly lit, with walls covered in maps, photographs, and strings of connected information. It was a makeshift command center, evidence of someone's desperate attempts to uncover the truth behind the outbreak. As Alice delved deeper into the room's contents, she discovered a name recurring across the documents: Dr. Samuel Caldwell, a renowned virologist. The information suggested that he might hold the key to understanding the origins of the disease and potentially finding a cure. Just as she was about to relay her discoveries to Ethan, a distant noise caught her attention, a muffled conversation from outside the room. Alice's heart raced as she realized that she was not alone in the facility. She needed to act quickly. Hastily, she snapped pictures of the command center and stuffed them into her backpack, leaving no trace of her presence. With caution and stealth, Alice made her way back towards the entrance, careful to avoid detection. Outside, she found Ethan anxiously awaiting her return. His eyes widened as he saw her, and he hurriedly ushered her to a secluded spot. They huddled close, their voices low and urgent as Alice shared the crucial information she had uncovered. Dr. Samuel Caldwell's name resonated with Ethan as well. He revealed that his uncle, a former colleague of Dr. Caldwell, had mentioned the renowned virologist's involvement in a top-secret government project. There were rumors that the outbreak might be connected to that very project. Armed with this knowledge, Alice and Ethan knew they had to find Dr. Caldwell. He held the answers they desperately sought, and he might be their last hope in saving their families and the town from the ravages of the disease. As night fell, Alice and Ethan devised a plan. They would search for clues that could lead them to Dr. Caldwell's whereabouts, starting with their own town. There had to be a connection, a place where the outbreak had first emerged, or where the virologist had left traces of his involvement. With determination in their eyes, they set out on a new mission. They scoured the town, examining abandoned buildings, old laboratories, and hidden research facilities. Every step brought them closer to the truth, but it also heightened the risks they faced. As they delved deeper into their investigation, Alice and Ethan realized they were not the only ones on Dr. Caldwell's trail. There were others, shadowy figures lurking in the shadows, watching their every move. It became clear that they were racing against time, and the competition for the truth was intense. Despite the danger that loomed, Alice and Ethan pressed on, fueled by their shared purpose and unwavering resolve. They would not rest until they unraveled the mysteries surrounding the outbreak, found Dr. Caldwell, and discovered the cure that would bring salvation to their town. Alice and Ethan's quest intensified as they ventured deeper into the heart of their town, chasing the elusive trail of Dr. Samuel Caldwell. Their steps were guided by a mix of instinct, gathered information, and the ever-present sense of urgency. They followed a lead that led them to an abandoned laboratory on the outskirts of town. The building stood decrepit, its windows shattered, and its walls covered in layers of dust. It was a place forgotten by time, but Alice and Ethan believed it held vital clues. With cautious steps, they entered the crumbling laboratory. Moonlight seeped through the cracks, casting eerie shadows across the barren floors. The air hung heavy with anticipation as they combed through the remnants of the forgotten research facility. Amidst the debris, Alice noticed a file cabinet standing in a corner. She pulled open the drawers, revealing a trove of forgotten documents. As she sifted through the yellowed pages, her eyes widened at the sight of familiar names and dates. The document spoke of experiments conducted by Dr. Caldwell, hinting at his involvement in genetic manipulation and viral research. It became apparent that the outbreak was not a mere accident, but rather a result of deliberate actions. An experiment gone awry. Shock and anger surged through Alice's veins as she absorbed the magnitude of the revelation. She couldn't fathom the idea that the very person they sought for a cure might be responsible for the town's suffering. It fueled her determination to uncover the truth and put an end to the chaos. Meanwhile, Ethan discovered a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard. Within it lay a worn journal, the diary of Dr. Samuel Caldwell himself. The entries chronicled his descent into obsession, his blind pursuit of scientific advancement, and the unintended consequences that followed. Page after page, Alice and Ethan delved into the depths of Dr. Caldwell's mind. They read about his guilt, his desperation, and his relentless search for redemption. It was a window into the tortured soul of a brilliant yet tormented scientist. As they neared the end of the diary, they stumbled upon a chilling revelation, a potential location where Dr. Caldwell might have sought refuge. The entry hinted at a hidden research facility nestled deep in the nearby mountains, a place where he believed the true cure might lie. Alice and Ethan knew they had to make their way to the mountain facility, even if it meant facing grave dangers. They had come too far to turn back now. Armed with the knowledge they had acquired, they set their sights on the hidden haven, hoping to confront Dr. Caldwell and find the answers they sought. Their journey to the mountains was treacherous. The terrain tested their endurance, and the elements seemed to conspire against them. Yet their determination never wavered, fueled by the belief that they were on the cusp of the truth. As they ascended the mountain, they encountered obstacles: a treacherous cliffside, sudden avalanches, and narrow paths that seemed to lead nowhere. Each hurdle they overcame brought them closer to their destination, further fueling their resolve. Finally, they stood before a massive steel door embedded into the mountainside, a gateway to the hidden research facility. With bated breath, Alice and Ethan exchanged a determined glance. They reached for the door, pushed it open, and stepped into the unknown, ready to confront the truth head-on. As Alice and Ethan stepped into the hidden research facility nestled within the mountains, an overwhelming sense of anticipation gripped them. The air was stale, and the corridors were dimly lit, creating an eerie atmosphere that mirrored their trepidation. They navigated through the labyrinthine halls, following the faint sound of humming machinery and the occasional flicker of fluorescent lights. The facility seemed abandoned, its silence broken only by the echo of their footsteps. With each step, Alice's heart pounded louder, her mind racing with questions. What would they find at the heart of this secretive place? And would Dr. Samuel Caldwell be waiting for them, ready to face the consequences of his actions? Finally, they reached a set of reinforced double doors, guarded by a retinal scanner. It was the entrance to the innermost chamber, a place they believed held the answers they sought. With a mix of apprehension and determination, they activated the scanner, its red laser illuminating their eyes. The doors hissed open, revealing a vast laboratory bathed in sterile white light. Countless test tubes, monitors, and scientific equipment adorned the room, painting a picture of meticulous research and experimentation. In the center of the room, seated at a pristine workbench, sat Dr. Samuel Caldwell. He appeared older than in the photographs Alice and Ethan had seen, his once vibrant eyes now clouded with remorse and regret. As he turned to face them, his gaze met theirs, and a mixture of surprise and resignation flickered across his face. "Who are you?" Dr. Caldwell's voice quivered with a combination of fear and curiosity. "How did you find this place?" Alice stepped forward, her voice firm but tinged with anger. "We are the ones affected by the outbreak. We've seen the devastation it has caused, the lives it has taken. We demand answers." Dr. Caldwell lowered his head, his voice filled with remorse. "I never intended for this to happen. It was a desperate attempt to find a cure, to eradicate the disease that plagued our world. But something went horribly wrong. Ethan's voice was filled with a mix of frustration and determination. "You need to tell us everything. We need to know the truth, Dr. Caldwell." With a heavy sigh, Dr. Caldwell began to recount the story. A tale of ambition, hubris, and unforeseen consequences. He revealed that the outbreak was a result of a genetic experiment gone awry, an attempt to engineer a cure that would eradicate the disease. The virus had mutated, becoming more virulent and contagious than ever imagined. "I thought I could control it," Dr. Caldwell confessed, his voice filled with regret. "But the more I tried, the more it spiraled out of control. Innocent lives were lost, and the disease spread like wildfire." Alice's anger softened into a mix of empathy and sadness. She realized that Dr. Caldwell, despite his mistakes, carried the weight of guilt upon his shoulders. He was a man haunted by the consequences of his actions. What now? Ethan's voice held a glimmer of hope. Dr. Caldwell's eyes met theirs, his voice filled with determination. "There is still hope. Deep within this facility lies the culmination of years of research. The true cure, the antidote that can save lives and bring an end to this nightmare. But it is not without risk." Alice and Ethan exchanged a glance, the weight of responsibility pressing upon them. They knew they had come too far to turn back now. With resolute determination, they vowed to do whatever it took to obtain the antidote and bring it back to their town. Alice, Ethan, and Dr. Samuel Caldwell stood at the entrance of the secured laboratory, where the antidote that could potentially save their town lay hidden. The weight of their mission bore down on them, knowing that time was of the essence. Dr. Caldwell led the way through the lab, guiding them towards the containment area where the antidote was stored. The corridors were filled with a hushed tension as they hurriedly made their way, their footsteps echoing in the sterile environment. Arriving at a heavily guarded door, Dr. Caldwell swiped his access card, allowing them entry into the highly restricted area. The room revealed rows upon rows of refrigerated chambers, each housing vials containing the potential cure. Working together, Alice, Ethan, and Dr. Caldwell meticulously gathered the vials, ensuring their safe handling and preservation. They understood that the fate of their town rested in their hands, and any misstep could have dire consequences. As they packed the vials into a secure container, a sense of urgency propelled them forward. The weight of their mission fueled their determination, driving them to move swiftly and efficiently. Every second counted, and they were racing against time. With the antidote in their possession, they retraced their steps, making their way back through the facility towards the exit. However, their path was soon impeded by an unforeseen obstacle. A door blocked by debris, a remnant of a recent tremor that had shaken the mountainside. Frantic, they assessed their options. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. The lives of their loved ones depended on their success. Alice's gaze shifted to a nearby maintenance closet, spotting tools that could aid in clearing the path. Without hesitation, they worked together, exerting their strength to move the debris and open a passage. Sweat streamed down their faces as they toiled, their determination unwavering. After what felt like an eternity, the path was finally cleared. They pressed forward, their pace quickening as they made their way out of the facility. The sight of the open sky brought a renewed sense of hope. The antidote was their beacon, a symbol of possibility amidst the darkness that had plagued their town. Back in their car, Alice, Ethan, and Dr. Caldwell embarked on the journey back to their town. The road stretched before them, illuminated by the headlights, as they shared a collective sense of purpose and responsibility. The drive was filled with a tense silence, each individual lost in their thoughts. Their minds were consumed with the task ahead, distributing the antidote, fighting against time to save lives, and bringing an end to the nightmare that had gripped their community. As they neared their destination, Alice's grip tightened on the container, holding the vials. She understood that the true test awaited them, the challenge of administering the antidote and navigating the logistical complexities of a town in chaos. Their arrival would be met with skepticism and fear, but they were prepared to face the challenges head-on. They had come too far to be deterred now. Their mission was clear: to save their town from the clutches of the disease and offer a glimmer of hope in the darkest of times. As Alice, Ethan, and Dr. Samuel Caldwell returned to their town with the precious antidote, they knew that the task of distribution would require a careful and strategic plan. The town's residents were in desperate need, and they had to act swiftly. They gathered at the town hall, where community leaders and concerned citizens had assembled, seeking answers and solutions. Alice took the stage, her voice steady and resolute as she addressed the crowd. "We have obtained the antidote," she announced, her words echoing through the hall. "But we need your cooperation and support to ensure its effective distribution. We will establish distribution centers throughout the town, where trained personnel will administer the antidote." The room erupted in a mix of relief and anticipation, with murmurs of gratitude and hope filling the air. Alice outlined the distribution plan, assigning teams to each center and emphasizing the importance of order and calm. Ethan and Dr. Caldwell worked alongside Alice, organizing the logistics and ensuring that each distribution center had a sufficient supply of the antidote. Volunteers stepped forward, eager to contribute to the effort and help their friends and neighbors. With the plan in motion, Alice knew she had to divide her attention between the distribution centers and her own home. She couldn't neglect her mother, who remained isolated and vulnerable. She had to ensure her safety and administer the antidote personally, leaving Ethan and Dr. Caldwell in charge of the distribution efforts. Alice hurried back to her house. As she entered, she couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease. The memories of her previous encounters with the infected loomed over her, fueling her determination to protect her mother. She fortified the house, securing doors and windows, and double-checking the alarm system. Every creak and shadow made her heart race, reminding her of the dangers that still lurked outside. But she couldn't let fear paralyze her. She had to be strong, for herself and her mother. Nightfall cast an eerie stillness over the town. As Alice settled in, home alone, she kept a watchful eye on her mother, making sure she was comfortable and safe. The silence was punctuated by distant sirens and occasional cries of despair, serving as a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation. Alice devised a plan to maintain vigilance throughout the night. She set up a system of alarms and motion sensors, strategically placed to alert her of any potential threats. With each passing hour, her senses sharpened, and her resolve grew stronger. As the night wore on, Alice's mind wandered to the faces of the town's residents, hoping that the distribution efforts were progressing smoothly. She knew that the antidote offered a glimmer of hope, but it also carried the weight of responsibility. Lives depended on their success. In the quiet solitude of her home, Alice found solace in her own determination. She would stay vigilant, ready to face any challenges that may arise. With the antidote in circulation and the town united in their fight against the disease, she held on to the belief that they would prevail.